Good evening and welcome to the final countdown. What if the secret to skipping death and surviving the end time events is found in one of the Bible's shortest stories? Now, there's only been two people that we know of who have been able to skip death and literally get out of this place without dying. Now, only two as of yet. And the reason I say as of yet is because there's going to be a group of people living in the end, which we're almost there, who is going to go through the time in Daniel 12:1 called the time of trouble, such as never was. And there's this group of people who is not going to see death either, just like Enoch, who is one of those two people who never seen death. Now, in this message, we're going to take a look and uncover some of the overlooked details in the story of Enoch. And hopefully, that story is going to give us the key and it's going to unlock the secret to how we can walk with God in the end times and, like Enoch, escape death itself. Now, before we start, we had a lot of questions last several studies, so many questions, and I want to address them, and I'm going to be talking about them sometime in the middle of this study. But for now, we need to give ourselves a little bit of background to this whole concept. So, the secret to skipping death, is it really that big of a secret? There's a lot of context that we're going to go over today, and there's four main points to the story of Enoch that we're going to cover that we need to focus in on in order to understand how we can apply this, and does it apply to us living right now, and how can we skip death and be one of those who can go to heaven alive. Now, before we begin, I would like to start with a word of prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you again that we can come together in this study. Please bless this study, bless the people listening. Thank you that we have this medium of the internet in order to connect and have this live Bible study. Guide us and guide everybody listening. In Jesus' name, amen. So we're going to give a little bit of a background. We're going to go through these 4 steps, and you're going to see some really incredible things you've probably never been shown before, never even noticed before, regarding the story of Enoch and how close it is and how similar it is to the experience those living in the end times is going to be. So we start in the book of Genesis, chapter 5, and verse 21. And Enoch lived 65 years and begat Methuselah. Methuselah is the man who has lived the longest of anyone else in history. And Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Very incredible. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. So the key part we're going to emphasize here, which is point number 1, is Enoch walked with God. This is the first thing. If you want to be translated alive, you have to walk with God too. I have to walk with God. We're not going to be translated and taken straight to heaven if we aren't walking with God. Now, here's one very important question. And I want to remind everyone, if you have your Bibles, put an amen in the chat. You're going to need them today. You're really going to need them today. Not that you don't every other time, but definitely you need to have your Bibles. And This first point is that Enoch walked with God. What does it mean to walk with God? Well, if we look at the book of Amos, chapter 3, verse 3. Amos 3, verse 3. There's a very important verse, and it says this: Can two walk together except they be agreed? So if Enoch is walking with God, he must be in agreement with God. He must be agreeing with God in order for him to be walking with God, because the Bible clearly says, how can two walk together unless they be agreed? So he obviously was understanding God, and as they were talking and as they were communing together, he was understanding and in agreement with what God was saying and what God was asking him to do, and how he was to act and live. And this is some key points that we're going to find out as we go through the story, that there's actually physical things that Enoch was doing that me and you need to do in order to have the same situation that he had happen to us, which is go alive and be able to go through this whole end time scenario. Now, also, if we go to Second Thessalonians, let's go to Second Thessalonians chapter 2. Second Thessalonians chapter 2. Now, this is a very fascinating chapter. Second Thessalonians chapter 2 is talking about this mystery of iniquity that already doth work. And it's talking about the Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders and deceivableness and all of this. Now, if we read verse 10, it says, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. This is a very important point, because in order for you to walk with God, in order for you to be in agreement with God, you must have to have a love of the truth, and not a love of what's popular, not a love of what your family and friends say, what the church says, a love of the truth. This is a very important thing, and it's not any truth. That's the key here. Is in this context, he's talking about the future and some events that are going to happen in the future, and how it's going to be leading up to the second coming of Christ, and who the key players are in this. So we need to understand the truth of the matter and have that light, or else we might be deceived what is going on around us. So again, Enoch walked with God, and we need to walk with Christ the same way that Enoch did if we want to have the opportunity to go to heaven alive. Now, if you know anybody who might be interested in this study, I ask if you can share the link with them so that they can join the live stream. Also, I'm just going to remind you guys that this is a live Bible study. What does that mean? That means we're going to answer your questions about end time events at the end of the study. So if you have any questions regarding what we're talking about today, then make sure you put them in the live chat, and we'll get to them at the end of the study. This is a very important subject because we're living in the last days, and we need to understand how we too can live and honor God through these last days, through the trials that are going to be coming, through this tribulation time period, and not fall, but walk with God so close that God takes us alive, because we're walking that close with him. Hebrews 11:5. By faith, Enoch was translated. And it says by faith. Now, this is a very fascinating point. We have a very similar statement in Revelation about faith. If we go to Revelation 14, verse 12, here's the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So the same faith that Jesus had is the faith that we must have in this group of people here in Revelation 14 called the 144,000 who have a special message to give. This is that group that is very much like Enoch. So keep in mind, there's two people in the Old Testament that went to heaven alive without seeing death. We're going to be talking about both those guys in some upcoming studies, but tonight we're focusing on Enoch and what lessons we need to learn from that in order to go through a time that's very similar to the one Enoch was living in. Enoch lived just before the flood. So keep in mind, this was at a time when judgment was coming upon the earth. This was a time when the world was so incredibly wicked. And Enoch was there as a light to the world. And there's some very important things that we're going to find out. By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death. That's point number 2, that he should not see death, and was not found because God had translated him. For before his translation, he had this testimony that he pleased God. And each and every one of us should want to have and desire to have that exact same testimony that we please God. If we don't please God, are we going to be translated? No, absolutely not. So we need to have this close walk with God, just like Enoch. And then we too can be part of this group who is not going to see death. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more here. By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death. For before his translation, he had this testimony that he pleased God. Hebrews 11:5, that's what we just read. The godly character of this prophet represents the state of holiness which must be attained by those who shall be redeemed from the earth. Revelation 14:3. At Christ's second advent, then as before the flood, iniquity will prevail. So we see here that there's this comparison between Enoch and this group in Revelation 14:3, redeemed from the earth. So let's go there. Revelation chapter 14. Now, this group is found in two different places in Revelation. Revelation 7, verse 4, and I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Revelation 14:3, and they sung as it were a new song before the throne and before the four beasts and the elders, and no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. So we have this special group of people, but what is actually the comparison with the 144,000 and Enoch? And this is something that I want to dive a little bit more deeply in. In order to do that, I'm going to pull up the whiteboard, blackboard in this case, because we really want to understand how we can be in a similar group that Enoch was in, so that we can be translated alive and be part of this faithful group, because this is the final group that will be on the earth. So we have Enoch. This is a little bit small. We're going to zoom in just a little bit. We have Enoch, And we have this 144,000. Now, what are the characteristics that are similar between these two? So Enoch was taken alive, and the 144,000 are redeemed alive, which basically means the same thing. And we're going to see that shortly. And we're going to do a whole extra study on the 144,000 and a lot of the details there. So taken alive, redeemed alive. Now, we're gonna show some of the different things here. Enoch prophesied the second coming. You're probably thinking, but he was way in the Old Testament. How is he even prophesying the second coming? And these people are prophesying the second coming. And a simple way to write this, now that I wrote this all here, is to say Enoch was an Adventist. And these people are Adventist. Because what does Adventist mean? That means that you are waiting for the advent of Christ. You're waiting for the advent of Christ. And that's what that means. So they are both Adventists. What are some other things? Well, we're going to see there's actually a key to where they were living. Enoch lived in the country. And these people have a call to leave the cities. So, very similar scenarios. We also have preaching judgment. And these people have a judgment message. So we're seeing that there is a lot of similarities between these two groups of people, Enoch and the 144,000, those people living at the end. Okay. We're going to switch back to the slides for a moment. It says here, from eternity past, page 49, men will rebel against the authority of heaven. But like Enoch, God's people will seek for purity of heart and conformity to his will until they shall reflect the likeness of Christ. Like Enoch, they will warn the world of the Lord's second coming. Like Enoch, it says, and by their holy example will condemn the sins of the ungodly. How many times have you been amongst friends, family, other, and you don't say anything, but just your actions, just the fact that you're there, people are acting as if you're making comments about them, as if, because when you live a certain way, it's like a living rebuke almost. And by the holy example, will condemn the sins of the ungodly. They will feel like you are judging them, even if you're saying nothing, even if you're silent. And this is the thing we have to keep in mind. Enoch went through the exact same scenario. As Enoch was translated to heaven, so the living righteous will be translated from the earth before its destruction by fire. Now, this fire is not hellfire. This is a fire when Christ comes the second time. The earth is consumed with fire. So, just like Enoch, he was warning of the coming of Christ, and we are warning of the coming of Christ. This is a very interesting thing. He was the first person taken alive, and hopefully we are part of the 144,000 will be taken alive, the first and the last, and they're both preaching the exact same message. Jude 14, Jude 1, 14 to 16. There's only one chapter in Jude. And Enoch also, the seventh from Adam, prophesied. Does that sound like he understood the last day events? Of these, saying, behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. What are words against God? This is blasphemies. These are murmurers, complainers, walking after their own lusts, and their mouth speaketh great swelling words, having men's persons in admiration because of what? Advantage. Because of advantage. This is a very important piece that we a lot of times gloss over. We don't fully understand. So let me switch back just for a moment. You know what? I'm going to read one more slide here. The prophetic gift is not limited to any one age. Early in the inspired record, we find instances of its manifestation. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, was a prophet. Looking down through the centuries, he saw the prophetic vision. He saw with prophetic vision the coming of the Lord and the execution of the final judgments upon the ungodly. This is a very fascinating point that Enoch actually seen the final events that are taking place. And this is one of the reasons that he was able to be translated, because he understood the full outcome. He understood the full redemption story. He understood the reward of the wicked and what was going to happen. He's seen the big picture. He walked with God. He understood. He agreed with God. He loved the truth more than life itself. And this is why he was able to go to heaven alive. Okay, before I go any further, let's go back to our whiteboard. And let's break this down a little bit more. Okay? So we have Enoch. Now he seen the second coming. This is really important. So he's seen the second coming and he prophesied about it. And this is exactly what the people in the last days are supposed to do. He seen the judgments. So he had a judgment message. Both to the end of the world and the end of his era, because his son Methuselah, his son's name literally means when he dies, it shall come. The destruction, the judgment shall come. So he was prophesying this as well. And I apologize, I just got kicked out of my session here. So I can't see if there are any questions. So let's take a look at some of the key factors here between Enoch and the last day events. Because, okay, he had judgment, and these sinners are speaking against him, or they're having blasphemy. Then it says these wicked are taking advantage. And this is for gain, advantage for gain. Now, do we see any of this in the last day events? So when we look at Revelation 14, there's something here called the three angels' messages, and we're going to just briefly touch on some of these. If we go to verse 6, Revelation 14 and verse 6, it starts with something called the first angel's message. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. So this first message given by this special group of people is the hour of his judgment is come. That judgment has begun. And we're going to put this on our board here, the judgment message. This is the first angel's message, and it's that judgment started. Now, there's a key point, though, later on that we're going to see, and it's almost the opposite here. So here's judgment. There's a judgment message. Judgment has started. Then if we keep going down, we see Babylon fallen. Then we see this thing in verse 9. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. So this is now judgment on the wicked. Now, this is all tied together, because if judgment has started, eventually judgment will end. The judgment process, should I say, will end. And then what comes after the judgment process ends? The actual judgments come. So this is a very important part. This is the wrath of God. I'm going to write that beside here. Wrath of God. These are the judgments that are pronounced. And this is what it says in Jude that Enoch seen, is that the executed judgments upon the wicked. And that is exactly the same thing that God's people are supposed to proclaim to the world, is the judgments that are coming on the wicked. Why? To warn them not to be part of the wicked and not receive the judgments. So now let's go back. Let's go back here. And we're going to jump to Revelation 18. Go to Revelation chapter 18. We're going to see some very fascinating here. Revelation 18 is a very important chapter. Why? There's something in there called the fourth angel's message. This fourth angel's message is of utmost importance to everybody listening right now. Right now, it is super critical. And if you want to look more into the judgment message, we have a whole series called the Judgment Day Studies. If you go to judgmentdaydocumentary.com, you'll see all 14 studies with all the study notes and everything else that goes with it. Plus, I want to remind everyone here, if you go and you go to finalcountdown.amazingdiscoveries.org and you subscribe to the newsletters, then you will get these study notes before the study begins so that you can follow along with the quotes and you have them there. If you want to print them up, if you want to mark them up, if you want to write on them, do whatever you want to do, then you can do that. And it's a great way for you to really visually see all the references and have that. So you don't have to worry while the study's going, marking all the things down. Now, if it's not on the slides, then you'll have to mark it down. But you can always go back and watch it later too. And please share. These are so important, these messages. This final events are right upon us, and we're trying to understand them as good as we possibly can with God's guidance. So this fourth angel's message, this is a incredibly important message. Now it says here, and this is in Revelation 18:1. And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. So what does this angel bring? Light. Now, what is light? A lot of people right away are going to answer truth. Light is truth. But is it just any truth? This is the thing. In order to have light, now in the olden days, in the time of Jesus, they had these little candles, and they were like a little pot, and they had a wick come out. And they made light. But in order for this little candle to make light, this lamp, okay, this little lamp here, in order for it to make light, it has to be filled with something. What does it have to be filled with? It has to be filled with oil. And what is the oil? The oil is the Holy Spirit. Now, what does the Holy Spirit do? We're told that the Holy Spirit will lead into all truth. But not just that. It says the Holy Spirit will lead you into all truth and show you prophecy. That's a shortened version. It says show you the things to come, and things that aren't here yet is prophecy. So the Holy Spirit is going to lead you into a true understanding of prophecy. And what does light do? So we have this light that is shining into a dark place. Now, why is that important? Why is it important that this light is shining into a dark place? If you have light, if you don't have light, let's say you're entering a building. Well, you can't see. What's just in front of you? I mean, you can't. Is there any people in there? Is there objects in there? Am I going to hit something? Am I going to fall into a hole? What am I going to do? You can't see. But as soon as you have light, I'll use this. This will be a better. As soon as you have light, what does that enable you to do? See ahead. See into the future. You can see now the other side of the room, the other side of the building, what's in there. As you're going, it'll see where you're going. I'm going over there. That's the future. So the light that we're being given is light of the future events. Now, the other thing that light does is it sheds a light on the truth and gives judgment. So this light that's coming, it's showing that judgment is taking place. It's showing that truth is coming. It's showing that a correct understanding of the final events is actually taking place. And I believe we're not going to get into all the detail on this tonight, but I'll give you a spoiler alert, okay? You're not going to want to miss any of the upcoming studies. There's just too many things that we're going to cover. When did this light come? Okay. There's a quote in Life Sketches. Is it LS? Life Sketches? Okay. Life Sketches. Let me see if I can pull this up really quickly. You know what? I'll get Jacob, could you pull this quote up for me? In Life Sketches, I believe it's 111 or so, in regard to Revelation 18, verses 1 to 3. Very, very important. Let's read these verses just to give ourselves context. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. So the whole earth is covered with this light and knowledge. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. So demons, all of these things. Okay. 411. Not 111. I knew I had something wrong there. 411.5. We're going to read this in a moment. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants. Okay, why are we talking about merchants here? Do you remember we just read in Jude that Enoch seen that, let me read it again. This is from Jude, verse 16. These are murmurers, complainers, walking after their own lusts, and their mouths speak great swelling words, having men's persons in admiration because of advantage. So we have these people who are gaining advantage over others, and they have admiration because of it, because of their riches, because of their advantages that they have. And here in Revelation 18, 1-3, we're seeing the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Now let me read to you this quote, LS 411.5. This is going to blow your minds. Now comes the word that I've declared that New York is to be swept away by a tidal wave. This I have never said. Just clarifying, she's just clarifying. I never said this. I have said, as I looked at the great buildings going up their story after story, what terrible scenes will take place when the Lord shall arise to shake terribly the earth. Then the words of Revelation 18, 1-3 will be fulfilled. Okay, so we're talking about when Revelation 18, 1-3 will be fulfilled. This is a sealing time that's talked about in 18, judgment time, judgment of living people. This is the sealing time of the 144,000. This is the fourth angel's message. This is the last message. This is the loud cry taking place. The whole of the 18th chapter of Revelation is a warning of what is coming on the earth. Does that not sound like what Enoch was saying? He was seeing the judgments and the warning of what was going to happen on the earth. That's what we need to look at. But I have no light in particular in regard to what is coming on New York, only listen carefully. Revelation 18, 1 to 3 is going to be fulfilled when the following happens. Only I know that one day the great buildings, plural, there will be thrown down by the turning and overturning of God's power. From the light given me, I know that the destruction is in the world. One word from the Lord, one touch of his mighty power, and these massive structures will fall. Scenes will take place, the fearfulness of which we cannot imagine. How many people were affected when the Twin Towers fell on September 11, 2001? And I'm just going to draw a couple towers here. This is fascinating. Is this really saying that when the towers fell in New York, Revelation 18, 1 to 3 is going to be fulfilled? That means that judgment is going to start? That means that we're so close to the ceiling? That means that the final events are actually happening right now? Well, I wonder if we can find this in the Bible. Let's go to Isaiah. And if you want to see an entire study on just this topic, go to the Judgment Day studies. There's one on the fourth angel's message, the whole thing about this topic. So make sure you go watch that video, but not right now. Stay with me. Let's take a look at Isaiah chapter 30. And like always, blue writing is Bible verses. Isaiah 30, and we're going to look, let's see here. Let's start at verse 23 to verse 25, and you're going to see something incredible. Then shall he give the rain of thy seed. Okay, I have to stop right there. So we have rain falling. What sort of rain are we looking for right now? The latter rain, right? The latter rain. That's what we're looking for. Shall give the rain of thy seed, that thou shalt sow the ground withal, and the bread of the increase of the earth. And it shall be fat and plenteous in the day that they shall thy cattle feed in large pastures. We're not going to get into all the symbolism here. The oxen likewise and the young asses that ear the ground shall eat clean provender, which hath been winnowed with the shovel and with the fan. So it's clean. And there shall be upon every mountain, upon every high hill, rivers and streams of waters. Why is there rivers and streams of waters? Because the rain was falling on the mountain. So here's the mountain. And we have streams of waters flowing down the mountain. In the day of the great slaughter, so wait, this is very important. Day of great slaughter, when the towers fall. This is right in the Bible. Now, what is the day of great slaughter? This is very important that you understand this. If we go to Isaiah chapter 27, it talks about this slaughter as well, this day of great slaughter. Now, we don't have time to go through all the verses right now. We'll take a look at this in more detail later. Isaiah 27:7. He hath smitten him as he smote those that smote him, or is he slain according to the slaughter of them that are slain by him? So, talking about a slaughter again. What is the day of slaughter? And what happens just before the day of slaughter is even just as important. In measure when it shooteth forth, thou wilt debate with it. There's a debate on truth. If anybody can see that, that is happening right now. There's a huge debate on the truth and on the final events. He stayeth his rough wind in the day of the east wind. There's so much here. Yet the defense cities shall be desolate. So in this time, the defense cities are going to be desolate. We're going to have these towers fall in the day of the latter rain, when the latter rain is beginning to really be poured out, when this message is coming. Let's go to Ezekiel chapter 9. Ezekiel chapter 9. Just quickly, we're going to look at this. Ezekiel 9, verse 1. He cried also in mine ears. I'm going to write the verse here. Ezekiel 9, verse 1 onward. With a loud voice. This is the same thing. This is the loud voice. Saying, cause them that have charge over the city to draw near, every man with his destroying weapon in his hand. And behold, 6 men came from the way of the higher gate, which lieth towards the north, and every man a slaughter weapon in his hand. And one man among them was clothed with linen, with a writer's inkhorn by his side. And they went in and stood beside the brazen altar, and the glory of God of Israel was gone up from the cherub, whereupon he was, to the threshold of the house. And he called the man clothed with linen, which had the writer's inkhorn by his side. Verse 4. And the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem. So who is being affected first? God's people. And set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the midst thereof. So there's God's mark now. We've seen that there was the mark of the beast, and those received the wrath of God, but now God is actually marking people. And then we go to verse 5. And to the others he said in mine hearing, go ye after him through the city and smite. Let not your eye spare, neither have any pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women. But come not near any man upon whom is the mark. And begin at my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men, which were before the house. So we have this sealing time, this marking time that is taking place. Mark is being put on them just before the day of slaughter. What is the day of slaughter? We can go into a lot more detail, but the day of slaughter is the time that Enoch was seeing, the time of the judgments. And what is the judgments? That's the message of the third angel's message. Don't receive of the mark of the beast, so you don't receive of the what? The wine of the wrath of God. So we have judgments coming, wrath of God, and we're going to define this further. This is time of the plagues. Also, we see this in Daniel 12, verse 1, known as the time of trouble. But God's people will be on earth. This is a big deception that God's people are going to be taken away before this time of trouble comes. That's not the case. God's people will be here during that time. Go to Isaiah 33. Isaiah chapter 33. Isaiah 33. Woe to thee that spoilest, and thou waste not spoiled, and dealest treacherously. So, right here in Isaiah 33, there is a time of woe. This is an important point. This time of woe. So there's a woe taking place. And then if we go to verse 2, it says, O Lord, be gracious unto us. We have waited for thee. What are we waiting for? His coming. We have waited for thee. But thou be thou their arm every morning, our salvation also in the time of trouble. So right here, chapter 33 of Isaiah is talking about the time of trouble, time of woe, and time of trouble. The Bible is so clear. All we have to do is look inside, and it says exactly the chain of events. Now let's skip down to verse 16. He shall dwell on high, his place of defense shall be the munitions of rocks. Bread shall be given him, his waters shall be sure. So during this time, God's people will be where? In the mountains. And at this time, their bread and water sure. Their bread and water will be sure. Now, this is in the time of trouble. This is very important that we understand the different sets of time here. And we've talked about this a little bit before. We are here. Then there's going to be something in Revelation 13, verse 17, called the no buy, no sell. And this is something that we're looking at happening really, really soon in the future. Then there's an event called, I'll write it out, close of probation. What does that mean? Judgment is over. Judgment over. This triggers 1, 2, 3. I'm writing really fast here because I have a lot to cover. The 7 last plagues. This time period here is the time of trouble, and also the woe time. There's a lot more that we could look into in this just tiny little section here. But the part I want to emphasize a lot right now is at the very end here. This section onwards is referencing Isaiah 33, verse 16. Bread and water. Before then, all through here, I'm going to change my color again. This section, if I can make it so blunt, bread and water, not sure. Not sure in the sense of God supplying without any effort on our part. We have an act to play. So let's go back to this fourth angel's message. So we just seen here, this light shining in a dark place is we can see ahead. Revelation 18 again. We were just going over that there's this time that's going to happen. And then there's a message being given in verse 4, Revelation 18:4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins and receive not of her plagues." So, this is incredible, guys. This is absolutely amazing. I'm going to go blue. What we're going to be doing right here, okay? This is the loud cry. Cry. Whoops. Loud cry. And what does that mean? It is the final call from the mark of the beast. It's the final call to say, don't take the mark or you'll receive the wine of the wrath of God. This is a repeat of the second and third angel. So this is incredible because in Revelation 18, verse 4, this is actually the fourth angel's message, but it's a repeat of the second and the third. And the third angel's message is, don't take the mark of the beast or you'll receive of the plagues. Here it says, come out of her, be not partakers of her sins, they receive not of her plagues. It has this, it's amazing how this correlation is. If we continue down all of chapter 18, which hopefully we'll be able to do an entire study on this. If we continue down, let's go down to, I don't want to read the whole chapter. Well, we can, let's reread end of verse 3 first. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So we see this abundance here. We see this advantage that was taking place. We see the merchants of the earth. And we're talking about the merchants of the earth. The merchants of the earth in Revelation 18, verse 1 to 3. The merchants of the earth. Are you saying the Merchants Trade Center? This was the World Trade Center, the merchants of the world. That's where all these people would meet. We have an incredible thing that's going on here with the connections. Now, we're not going to go any deeper in 18 right now because we can continue for hours and hours and hours on this. But let's pause there for a moment. And we're going to go back to our slides for a minute. Okay, let's go back to our slides. The prophetic gift is not limited to any one age. Early in the inspired record, we find instances of its manifestation. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, was a prophet. Now let's continue on. Those who are watching for the Lord are purifying their souls by obedience to the truth. So what causes the purifying of souls? What causes that ability for us to walk with God? It's obedience. This is very important. Very important. Just like Noah, just like Enoch, just like all the stories. When they seen a prophecy about future events, they took action. They had obedience connected with it. With vigilant watching, they combine earnest working. So they're watching and working, watching and working. Noah was watching and working. All these people. And God's people should be watching and working, not just watching. And I see so many people just watching. That's all they're doing. Oh, I seen that one. I seen that. But they're not doing anything. They're not changing the way they are. They're not showing obedience. They're not being an example to the world. They're not standing out like a sore thumb, like Noah did building this giant ark. We need to do things that get the attention of the world because what we're doing is different. People look at the Amish and they're like, oh, that's an Amish. You can tell because of what they're doing. And this is a Mormon because of the way they dress and the way they act and the way they this. If people don't see you and say, oh, that's then there's a problem. If someone's not seeing you and they think that if someone's seeing you and thinking you're just like everybody else, there's a massive problem. They should see you and say, whoa, what is that? They're not a Amish. They're not a Mormon. They're not a this. What is that? I'm sure that's what they were saying when Noah came along and said, everybody, there's going to be a flood. It's going to destroy the entire world. Get on my boat. And they're like, are you crazy, old man? Get on your boat? Really? I'm going to look like a fool if I get on your boat. God would not possibly destroy the entire world with a flood. Like, we don't even have big oceans. They didn't have big oceans before the antediluvian time. This was an entirely new concept that the whole world would be covered in water. This was crazy. Because they know that the Lord is at the door, their zeal is quickened to cooperate with the divine intelligence in working for salvation of souls. These are the faithful and wise servants who give to the Lord's household their portion of meat in due season. They're declaring the truth that is now specially applicable. Sorry. This is so key that we need to be declaring the truth that is now specially applicable. A lot of people are talking about all sorts of great things, but great things doesn't mean applicable things. We need to be talking about what's applicable. And what does that mean? It has to be timely. It has to be what the events are that we're going to see and what people are going to face. That's why in this whole series, we're discussing the entire timeline of events from now all the way till the second coming and warning, because we don't want anybody to be unready for what's coming. And it would be dishonest of me not to say what I know, not to share with you what the Bible has revealed to us in the book of Revelation, the revealing. This is given so that we can be obedient and ready for what is coming. As Enoch, Noah, Abraham, and Moses each declared the truth for his time, so will Christ's servants now give the special warning for their generation. And if we believe Christ is coming soon, if you are saying that Christ is coming soon, if you've told anyone this or thought this and done nothing, please take this warning as a wake-up call right now. If you've said Jesus is coming, but you haven't changed your ways, you haven't changed the way that you're living, you haven't done the things that you know you need to do, because most people know a lot of what they need to do, but they say, I can't because of this, I can't because of this, I can't because of this. There's no reason to not do it. That's your whole goal for being here for 80 years, 90 years, 100 years, is to learn how to be obedient under all circumstances, not how to get a house, how to this, how to that, how to have vacations, how to have fun with friends. That's not why we're here. We're here for one purpose. Our one purpose is to warn the world of what's coming. Our one purpose is to say Jesus is coming soon, and you need to be right with him so that you can not receive the wine of the wrath of God. That is the message. I mean, I just said it verbatim. Don't receive the mark of the beast and don't receive the wine of the wrath of God. It's that simple. It's not rocket science. But because of that, we have to be obedient and do the things. Noah seen a flood coming and he warned the people, get in the boat. So he built a boat and he said, get in the boat. we need to be doing the same. We need to say, this is coming. Here's what I'm doing. Join me. And that should be our message to the entire world. Be ambitious for the Master's glory, to cultivate every grace of character. In every phase of your character building, you are to please God. This you may do, for Enoch pleased him through living in a degenerate age. And there are Enochs in this our day. Amen. There needs to be Enochs today living in the degenerate world that we're in, but walking so tightly with God that God says, I can't leave him there anymore. Christ came into the world to save it, to connect fallen man with the infinite God. Christ's followers are to be channels of light, truth, end time truth, maintaining communion with God, there to transmit to those in darkness and error the choice blessings which they receive of heaven. Enoch did not become polluted with the iniquities existing in his day. Why need we in our day? But we may, like our Master, have compassion for suffering humanity, pity for the unfortunate, and a generous consideration for the feelings and necessities of the needy, the troubled, and the despairing. We need to do just like Enoch did if we want the same situation to happen that happened to Enoch. As God's commandment-keeping people, we must leave the cities. Why am I harping on this? And a lot of people say, MacKenzie, and this is something that I have to address that came up in a lot of comments. It's too late. It's too. Okay, I'm going to finish this quote. As God's commandment-keeping people, we must leave the cities, as did Enoch. We must work this in the cities, but not dwell in them. I have a lot more slides that I need to share, but I want to switch back to the whiteboard. So we're going to do a little bit of jumping around right now. So I apologize for that. But okay, we have to address some of the things that are being said. And somehow I lost my pen right here. Okay. What is this thing? So country living. Why do I keep harping on this? Well, in Revelation 13, verse 17, it says there's this no buy, no sell. And it doesn't matter how you slice it. That means that you're not going to be able to buy food, water, power, clothing, electricity. I said that already. Septic, any of these things in order to survive. This is not the first time this has happened. So don't be shocked. Don't be surprised. Don't say, well, that couldn't really take place. It's actually already happened before. Now, those who think it could not happen, it's just like the people in Noah's day. Noah was saying something would happen that sounded impossible. And they said, couldn't happen. So we don't need to do anything about it. And even if it did happen, God would put a magical bubble around us and we'll be fine. Now, a lot of people who even might believe in this say, well, really sorry to say, guys, but, it's too late. It's just, it's too late. It'll take too long to move. I don't have the money to do this. And, it's just, we can't anymore. I mean, if we heeded the counsel, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, this would be fine. But now, MacKenzie, really? It's too late. Do you see how close we are to the final events? Do you see how close, this no buy, no sell, Sunday law, all the other wording is, do you see how close we are to the time of trouble? It's too late. And I'm here to tell you right now that it's not too late. Okay? Let me write it like this. Never too late to be obedient. If you can give me an example when it's okay to be disobedient, then I will agree with you. But it's never too late to be obedient. And this is an important fact that we have to acknowledge. If Noah was told there's going to be a flood, and he said, no problem. So God says, flood is coming. And Noah's sitting over here. This is Noah. And says, great. No problem. I'm going to preach to the world that a flood's coming. What if he did that? And he did not build his boat? What would happen to Noah? His his smile would be turned into a frown, and he would be underwater like everybody else. The differentiating factor between Noah and the ones who did not make it were they were in the ark or they were out. That was the difference. That one built, the other did not. One was obedient to the warning. The other, not. That's the difference. It's as simple and plain as that. And when we are talking about this time of no buying, no selling, it is just like the flood. And if we want to say, okay, no buying, no selling, well, God will just keep me. My bread and water will be sure. I'm sorry, we just showed that the bread and water will be sure only in the time of trouble, and that's after probation is closed. We had a whole study on that. Go back to the several past studies, and this was abundantly clear. And Enoch lived in the country. Enoch was a country folk. He was not being allowed to pollute himself with the things in the city. That's how he could walk with God so close. This is how he did this. Look, we have Enoch. Walked with God. And we need to ask the question, where? In the country. What about Jesus? Okay? Where did he commune with God? In the country / mountains. What about Abraham? Country. And I could go on and on and on. You're not going to be able to have that intrinsically close connection if you are putting yourself in a place that is constantly tearing you from this connection. And it is not too late. Absolutely not too late. We're going to go back to the slides here for a minute. Send the children to schools located in the city where every phase of temptation is waiting to attract and demoralize them, and the work of character building is tenfold harder for both parents and children. And then some people say, well, it's not impossible. So she doesn't say it's impossible, she says it's tenfold harder. Why would you do that to yourself? If you know that it's tenfold easier in a certain place, you do that. How hard is it to raise children these days and not be distracted by the world? Infinitely, incredibly hard. Why would you not take that advantage? Tenfold is the difference between your kids making it or not making it. This is in my opinion, it's no option. If you have children, you move this minute. This is my plea to parents. If you're a parent right now, and I'm not a parent, I have been able to, influence a lot of young people, and I praise God for that. I don't have any children myself. Um, but if I had a child and if I was in the city, as soon as I knew that child was coming, I'd be out of there that second. No hesitation from me. I would do every possible thing I could because I've seen so many children ruined because of influences, because of friends, because of family, because of all the wickedness in the city. No phone, no computer, no nothing. They'd be in the dirt, in the forest, doing their thing, learning from nature. That's it. I mean, there would be no other option. Enoch lived in the country. He had a child called Methuselah. Where do you think Methuselah was raised? In the country. Why do you think his children were still following God? Because they're raised in the country. This, I mean, I'm sorry if I'm being like really straight right now, but this is so traumatizing for me, to see people let their children just be destroyed, literally destroyed, because they're unwilling to make this small little change, this sacrifice. Oh, but I have this good job. I have that. I have, close to family. You don't need family. You don't need job. You don't need nothing. You need God. Your children need God. That's what they need. And they need to see God at work. They need to see your faith. They need to see you doing what you need to do and putting them in the situation that they did. And I praise God that I was raised, for the most part, basically the whole part, in the country. When I was a kid, people talk who are in the city, and I'm in the country, and they ask, what about the Bears and what about the this and what about the that? When I was like this big, probably this big, I was a tall little kid. um, I was running in the bush for miles. And we'd come across bears. We'd come across mama bears with babies. We'd come across all sorts of things. Wolves. We had a lot of wolves. And we'd be walking, and the wolves would be walking with us. And there was, really no fear of that, because God gave dominion to his people over the animals. There's no need to fear. And they're not looking to just go and, kill everybody. This is like absolute nonsense. I would be playing outside, and there'd be a bear, 50 feet away. And then when I seen it, I wouldn't, hang around or go try and pet it or anything like that. But I'd just give it its space and, walk away. And there's this unnatural fear. And I think Satan's doing this, the fear of the country, fear of country living, fear of all of this. I would much rather my kids be in the bush somewhere and get eaten by a bear than lost in the city. And that sounds dramatic, but it's entirely true. Because at least I know that they're going to be saved. At least I know they have the bright influences. At least that I know that they're in the right place to give them the best advantage they can to combat the wiles of Satan. I need that tenfold easier advantage. I think everybody needs a tenfold easier advantage, because raising kids is extremely, extremely hard. And you should do everything in your power to change their physical location. Change their physical location. And look, Enoch, his son died the year the flood came. And Methuselah built on the ark. Methuselah literally helped build the ark, even though he died before the tragedy happened. He still built the ark. And this is one of the reasons he'll be saved. If he did not, he might have not. If he did not build on that ark, I guarantee you, he wouldn't have been in the same camp. He would have been with all the other people. But he was willing to stand out and be different. He was willing to be seen physically working on the ark. So this is a huge thing for our children. The cities, and then other people will say this: the cities are to be worked from outposts. Said the messenger of God, shall not the cities be warned? Yes, not by God's people living in them, but by your visiting them to warn them of what is coming upon the earth. You're not supposed to live in the wickedness. You're supposed to warn the wickedness. You don't go to the evil places and set up camp and live there. That's exactly what the children of Israel were not supposed to do. They're supposed to be in the country. They had allotted large pieces of land, enough to grow their own food, enough to make a living. And this is, I mean, if you're wanting to move to the country and start selling from your property. Get a property where you can grow food, you can sell it to your local market, you can do these things. We have a training program here, the Farm Apprenticeship Program, farm.amazingdiscoveries.org, where you can learn how to prepare for the final events, how to grow your food, how to do these things. But also, if you want to have that as part of the thing that sustains you while you're working, then you do that. Then you do a market garden. Then you do things where you can support yourself doing God's work. And support yourself raising your kids. They can be involved with this. This is something that all the kids can. We have so many kids helping us on the garden here, and so many kids that are learning, and they see all the little things growing, and they're playing with all the animals, and it doesn't get better than that. There's no better place for your kids to be. Shall not the cities be warned? Yes, but not by God's people living in them. You don't live like the world to reach the world. You can't help someone who is in a pit if you're in a pit. You need to be out the pit, and then you throw a rope down and pull them out of the pit. You don't jump down and say, I'm here with you. No, that's not how we do it. But by their visiting them, to warn them of what is coming upon the earth. And its destruction. That's what's coming upon the earth. The time of trouble is a time of trouble such as never was. Destruction is coming to the big cities. This is what the Bible is saying to us. This is a warning that is going to happen. When iniquity abounds in a nation, there is always to be heard some voice giving warning and instruction, as the voice of Lot was heard in Sodom. Yet Lot could have preserved his family from many evils had he not made his home in this wicked, polluted city. He lost his family because he refused to do what the angel said. All that Lot and his family did in Sodom could have been done by them, even if they had lived in a place some distance away from the city. Everything that Lot did, all the great stuff, the sermons he preached, the people he contacted, he could have done from outside Sodom. And he could have saved his wife and his children. But he made excuses to himself. Oh, it's comfortable here. I got a good job, this and that. I'm witnessing to people. But Abraham was outside. Enoch walked with God, and yet he did not live in the midst of any city polluted with every kind of violence and wickedness, as did Lot in Sodom. This is the thing. Are we willing to be and live different? Are we willing to go forward in faith? Are we willing to, if we want to have the same result as Enoch, walk with God, be translated alive, be part of that 144,000 group who's going to give the final message, reap the harvest of all of the people that are coming in because of the loud cry message, and be taken alive, then you have to pull out every stop. Every stop needs to be out. And you need to be full steam ahead, driving yourself closer and closer to God. And not one thing can hold you back. It can't be your diet. It can't be what you're watching. It can't be what you're breathing. It can't be where you're living. It can't be your family. It can't be your friends. It has to be everything. We have to give up everything in order to have that character difference. And here's the thing. Country living isn't just about saving our skin. It's about a character development process that can't take place in the city. And I'm sorry if it's just the reality. You can't gain it in the city. I'm not saying every person in the country is like Jesus, but you can't do it in the city. It doesn't allow for it. You're in Satan's territory. Who built the first city? The first Tower of Babel that had to come down. This is wickedness. This is Satan's plan to pull people together and have all this centralized wickedness. God's plan, when the people went to Canaan, he gave them each a lot of land. And that was their land forever, passed down generation to generation to generation. If God's people had heeded the warning to get out of the cities when we were told, we would have farms to pass down to our generations that would be worth a lot of money. And even if the city started to get larger, all we have to do is sell that and move again. But we have all that money, and now that has extrapolated in value because the city is encroaching on it, and we move again. That's what needs to happen. If the city has engulfed you, you have to move. I mean, that's just, it's that simple. And Ellen White even talks about this. As the cities expand and they start reaching to where our country properties are, we sell that and we move again because we need to keep that distance. If we have someone who's a danger to our relationship with God, and they're on the other side of the country and it doesn't matter, and then they move closer, what if they move to be our neighbor and every day they're tearing us down? We should physically move ourselves from that position. We need to make sure that we are separated as far as possible from the pollution of wickedness if we want to stand at the end. This is critical in order to have that experience. Revelation 14. It says, verse 1, and looked, and lo, the Lamb stood on the Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, which we're going to do more studies on, the 144,000, having his Father's name written in their foreheads. That means his ownership. That means that we are sealed with the Father's name. That means his character is embodied in us. And I heard a voice from heaven as the voice of many waters, and the voice of a great thunder, and the voice of harpers harping with their harps, and they sung as it were a new song before the throne. Now let's go down to verse 4. These are they which were not defiled with women, not literal women, with false doctrine, false church, for they are virgins. They're not polluted by any false doctrine. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. And if Jesus goes into the country to be close to God, and we say, I don't need to do that, I can do it in the city, you're not following the Lamb. You're saying you're stronger than Jesus. You're more powerful than Jesus. You don't even need to do what Jesus did to stay connected. I can be good without these things. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and unto the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no guile. No guile. They don't speak like the world in any way. No way do they speak like the world. You can't recognize it. They are visibly different than the rest of the people. Might call them odd singular, straight-laced, extremist. But that should actually make us feel like, wow, okay, I'm looking different. I'm being seen differently. As long as we're not doing it for show. That's something we don't want to do. Don't want to do things for show. We want to do things because we love God. Just like Enoch did, so that we can be taken alive. Because the events are closing really quickly upon us, and I want to be alive to see Jesus come. I want to be alive when all these events are happening. A lot of people are fearful of the end times, and there is going to be things that are not nice to see. But we're also going to see the largest harvest of people coming into the truth that ever has been witnessed. Ever. We're going to talk about that too in some upcoming studies. Make sure you join the newsletters because you don't want to miss any of the details. We went on a couple different divergence than I had originally thought we would. But this is such a dear message to me. It's something that really got me when I was young. When I first learned about the no buy, no sell time period, when I was probably somewhere around 12, maybe even a little less than that, somewhere around there. It was exciting to me. It was something that I was like, wow, we need to start getting ready. We need to prepare. I was researching, I was growing, I was learning how to save seeds. I was, looking into all these things and all the tools I needed, and I started buying tools. And even at a young age, that's where my money was going. And we need to be putting all our effort into preparing and into having our character change to be like Christ. Okay, we're going to take some questions here. We're going to take some questions. Okay. Kelly Kimbrough. Question. Amen. This is the answer that the Lord laid on my heart. That is how the investigative judgments work. Sorry. Let me go back here. Amen. This is the answer that the Lord laid on my heart. That is how the investigation judgment works. It's those alive at his coming that can exist in his presence. Let me see if I can figure out exactly what you're asking here. So when we're talking about the people who are living when the judgment is closing, it's not because of any inert strength that any individual has, but because they are holding on to Christ so tightly that nothing else absorbs their mind. And that's the thing. Peter started to sink when he took his eyes off Christ, and the 144,000 and all the people who are coming in need to have their eyes single focused on Christ. And that's all that they look at. And by doing that, they are able to stand during the time when the investigative judgment is closing. And if you want to write back and clarify any of the thoughts there, thank you for your question. Let's see here. Christopher McGill. Question, is AI part of Babylon's system, digital pope and counterfeit logos enforcing loyalty? See, the telegraph was nationalized in 1844 at the Judgment's start. Could this relate to the sealing of the 144,000? Okay. Here's the thing. It doesn't really matter the system that is used to control the monetary structure. The thing is, the mark of the beast is a mark that is you either have the mark of the beast or you have the mark of God. You either have the seal of God and the mark of the beast. There's those two options. When you choose one of those options, then the following takes place. I'm going to switch to my whiteboard again because I think that'll be easier for answering the questions. And my whiteboard has disappeared here. Just a moment. There we go. Okay. So we have the seal of God, and we have the mark of the beast. Now, we did a whole study on the seal of God. The seal of God is actually contained in the 10 commandments, in the fourth commandment, the Sabbath, the seventh day. This is where the seal of God is found, and those who are keeping the Sabbath and the seventh day will receive the seal of God if they continue to do so. Now, the mark of the beast is a very similar order. In Revelation 13, it says that the beast mark has to do with changing times and laws, God's time and God's law, and that only time and law that is changed is the Sabbath to Sunday, the first day. And this is the mark of the beast. The beast being, should have gave myself a little more room, the papacy. And if anybody's confused by this, go to the first couple studies of the final countdown, and we cover this in immense detail. So you either receive the seal of God by being obedient to God, and it says here in Revelation 14:12, here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So they have the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. So the mark of the beast, how this is going to be played out is like this. There's going to be a Sunday law. Okay? And if anybody doesn't believe this, when it happens, you will believe it. There's going to be a Sunday law, and they are going to, it's going to be progressive, just like everything. But eventually, it's going to lead up to no buying and no selling if you don't worship on Sunday. Okay? This is what's going to take place. Now, God's people have a choice. Are they going to take the mark of the beast, and MOB is mark of the beast, or are they going to receive the seal? I should just shorten it. The seal of God. Okay? There's those two options. Now, what happens because of those options, if you take the mark of the beast, you can temporarily buy and sell. The only problem is pretty quickly thereafter, you receive of the wrath of God and the plagues. So that's not a great scenario. If you have the seal of God, you won't be able to buy or sell, but You will have heeded the counsel, and you will be in the country. You'll be growing your own food, and you won't receive the plagues. So this is the breakdown. Now, the reality is they can just ask the question, um, do you keep Sabbath or Sunday? That's it. That's as simple as it can be. And they won't let you into the store. I mean, yes, they're going to have all these, digital currencies, like Bitcoin. I think it's the logo is something like this. Um, they're going to have all this, surveillance system that is going to be having cameras everywhere watching everybody. There's going to be all this monitoring. And the thing is, that really only affects you if you're in a place that looks like this, in a city. Because if you're out in the countryside somewhere in the mountains and you're growing your veggies, these laws really don't affect you. And God warns us not for just everybody thinks that things are so spiritual. So, like living in the country, um, we're leaving the cities for this spiritual advantage to grow our own food, but also because what's going to take place in the cities is going to be so detrimental. There's destruction coming. If you just look up different cities, if you look up the word cities in the Bible, you see all the destructions that are pronounced on the wicked cities. I mean, we've seen in um, Isaiah 27, destruction on the cities. If you look in Joel, that whole book of Joel, and that would be amazing to do a whole breakdown on that on one of the studies. The whole book of Joel, we see the destruction taking place. There's going to be such control that is taking place in these cities. You have people that don't know exactly what the final events are, saying, get out, get ready, something's going to happen. You need to be able to grow your own food. You need to be able to be self-sufficient in all of these things. It doesn't take control from the system. It's very simple. If you don't have XYZ, I mean, we've seen this during um, the pandemic, that if you don't go along with a certain mandate, then you can't buy, you can't go into certain stores, you can't do things. It's really simple. But yes, they definitely want to control, but that is not inherently connected to the mark of the beast. It's a way that they will be able to enforce it easier and keep track of people. Okay. Let's see here. Marilyn Richardson question: was not the light given in 1844 the midnight cry? Okay. This is a huge question. 1844. And we're going to put here April, and then going forward all the way to July and August. Okay. August. And there was a message by SSS. Okay. That's his initials. Samuel Snow. I'll just shorten this to SS Snow. And he gave what was called the midnight cry. And I don't know if I have the booklet here right now. I might have actually given the booklet I had here to someone. So I don't have it here at the moment. Called The True Midnight Cry by Samuel Sheffield Snow. If you type in TRMC1 space 1, because that's the page number, it'll bring you to The True Midnight Cry. And there is 5 points on how they proved the whole Advent message there. And yes, the light that was shining on the path, and you're talking about the first vision. There was a pathway. And all along the pathway, okay, there was people. Now, there was one sad thing, is some of the people fell off the pathway. And the reason they fell off the path was there was a light from the back of the path, actually shined like this on the ground, all the way to the end. And the reason that these people fell off is they denied the light. And we are told that that light is the midnight cry. So if that light is the midnight cry, I highly recommend going and reading TRMC1, because that is the true midnight cry. And it'll explain a lot of that context there. For those that might be a little bit, this is new for them, go back to our Judgment Day studies. There's one entirely on the midnight cry. And it's an amazing thing that took place in the 1840s that you really should understand, because that's an intricate part of Revelation 14. Thank you for your question. Okay. And just back on the last question, the first time in America that Sunday law was passed was in 1888. And there was a Sunday law, and they had no tech. So there was no tech connected to that. No digital currencies or anything like that. So it's irrelevant of the technology. It's all about worship, because that is what the mark is. It's either you worship the mark of the beast or you worship God. Okay. Productions. Questions. Since 9/11/2001, the earth has been illuminated with God's glory. Yes. So here's the thing. And I'm giving a very brief history. I don't know if I can take it back that far. Okay. I'm trying to think how I can simply answer this without it being an entire study in itself. There was a lot of things that took place in 2001. When we look at the 7 churches in Revelation, chapter 2 and 3, there's one in particular called Laodicea. I spelled that wrong. Laodicea. And they're sleeping. But that's not the worst part. They are poor, they're blind, and they're naked. And the problem is, it's not even that. Is that the problem? They think they are not. And this is the big dilemma. They think they have it all together. They think they have all the truth. The problem is, okay, there's a story. I'm going to have to reference it. So this is a chest. Okay, little casket, and inside there's these precious gems. Okay, rubies and all these amazing jewels. Okay, and then there's some gold in here. I don't know what gold should look like to you guys. Maybe there's a little bar of gold here. So in this chest, and you can find this in the book Early Writings, and the chapter is called Miller's Dream. It's an incredible dream. Maybe we'll do an entire study just going through this dream. And the dream is talking about this chest with all these jewels inside. And these jewels get thrown out, and the casket gets torn in pieces. It literally gets ripped in pieces. All these jewels are the truths, and they're being thrown around, they're being thrown everywhere. And then someone comes along, the man with the dirt brush, and he starts cleaning up the room, and he starts pulling out the jewel from all the dust and everything, and he puts them back in a new chest that was just like the original, but it was larger, and all the jewels shine brighter than they ever have before. This is the experience of Laodicea. Laodicea took all the truths and they threw them away. They threw the principles away. They got rid of all these things. They're poor, blind, and naked. But they think they're not. They think, oh, we know everything. We know all about Sunday law. We know all about the sanctuary. We know all about etc., etc., etc. The problem is they're missing a lot of key points. And we need to wake those people up. And in 2001 is when the jewels started to be put back in the chest. There's a lot of things that took place in 2001. We would have to go through an entire study just to cover all the things in 2001. There was some significant things that took place. One being the towers fell. And this was a sign. Now, there's something called the Lord's Day Alliance. And these guys basically advocate for Sunday worship. And they said because of 9/11 that Sunday law is now possible. That's a very incredible statement. And they said this in one of their newsletters. The other fascinating thing is they were established. Their establishment date was in 1888. That's the very year that the Blair's Bill went into effect. The Blair's Bill was a Sunday law bill. There's a ton of stuff to talk about 2001. I can't get into everything tonight, but this is when the truth really started coming back to God's people, and they started proclaiming it with power. There's a lot more to get to on that, but we'll save that for another day. Okay. I'm really sorry. C Productions. There, I just gave you an acronym. Question: if Revelation 18:1-3 has already been fulfilled, why then are we still here? Also, would not the call to abandon Babylon the Great had already been given? Okay. Abandon Babylon is not the call in 18:1-3, but I think I know what you mean. So Revelation 18, verse 1-3 is this light to the world. Okay? Now, just because this has started to be fulfilled, it's not ended yet. Because remember, 1 to 3 is being fulfilled. What's verse 4? Come out of her, my people. So verse 4 is come out of her. The thing is, this right here, the light, this is the important part at the start, is that we are missing some light on the last day events. And this is what came in 2001 was the true understanding of the last day events. Now, you may think, well, we've known this for a long time, but we haven't known this for a long time. And we are very in darkness about the last day events. That's why throughout the course of this study, we're going to be going through all the waymarks, all the way to the second coming. We are here. Then there's going to be a no buy, no sell. And then there's going to be a lead up to the close of probation. What is that lead up? What is the sign of the close of probation? What are the events happening during the plagues? What are the plagues? This has been a mystery. What is the final woe that's talked about in the book of Revelation? There's a third woe coming. There is a time of Jacob's trouble. What is the time of Jacob's trouble? There's going to be false Christ. But here's the problem. This is the question. When? And a lot of people do not know. They think it's going to be really soon. But is this biblical? There's going to be miracles, but these are deceptive miracles. There's going to be a new world order, but we have to ask the question again, when? There's going to be a loud cry. When? And what? And how? There's going to be no buy, no sell. And same question. When? How long? A lot of people are wondering. What do we have to do about it? All these are super important things. And this has just been a mess. I mean, if we look at the final events, look at this. If we look at Revelation, and I mean, if we go to chapters 8 and 9, okay? 8 and 9 are about something called the 7 trumpets. How many people are clear on that? As many pastors there is there's a new version of the 7 trumpets. Okay, so now let's go to the next. We go to chapter 10. What is this about? There's a thing called time no longer. What is this? Then 11, we have another very fascinating events that are taking place. In 12, I can't even begin to express how much division there is in all of these chapters, even 13. Because here's the thing. What we originally understood about chapter 12 is, and this is going to shock you guys, the first dragon in chapter 12 is pagan Rome. This is what all Seventh-day Adventists taught in 1844 onwards. Chapter 13, we have the papacy. The thing is, what are the 7 heads? What are the 10 horns? This we don't have any unity on. Why? Because we're Laodicean. If we look at the image of the papacy, of the beast that's talked about, this final power, the beast with lamb-like horns, what are they going to do? Then if we go to chapter 14, this is the three angels' messages. But people don't really understand the three angels' messages at all. They don't even understand the first, the hour of his judgment. When did that take place? Most people can repeat, October 22, 1844. A lot of people know that date. How do you get there? And this is where nobody knows. They don't want to get to 1844. It's very easy. MacKenzie, why are you asking this? We use the 2300 days. Okay. How do you get to October 22? How do you do this? How do you get there? People can't answer that. That's why we need to go back to the true midnight cry, because this is the answer. If we go to chapters 15 and 16 and 17 and 18, they're all connected. They're all talking about the time of the plagues. And we have no unity on this. Who is the 10 horns? And we're going to go over this in detail. Who's the 10 horns? Who is this scarlet beast? And what is this? And we could call this the New World Order. What does that look like? We could ask the question, who? We need to ask the question, when? How? These are all super important. And the answer is going to absolutely shock you, because people are so confused. They're so confused of when everything is going to take place. That's why we have to read in the minutest detail. So when we read 18, 1-3, this is just light coming back to Laodicea. So they're waking up. This is the 10 virgins. They need the light. This is, we need to shake the people. A shaking is being caused. A sealing is taking place so they can give the message. This come out of her is the loud cry. The final message. And you have to understand the true line of prophecy in order to give that message. Because a lot of people are saying, the next thing we're looking at is Satan appear as Christ. This is what we're looking for, everyone. And then he is going to enforce Sunday law. Sunday law. So here's how it works. Satan appears. I'm going to draw Satan in looking kind of like Jesus in a robe. I apologize for my terrible drawing. Okay. So this is Satan, and he's going to appear on earth. And now this is warning to get ready for Sunday law. Because now Sunday law is under the making, because Satan's appeared. He's going to start working with, the government and the people and everything. He's going to convince them to make a Sunday law. If that's the case, there's no hurry. Here's the problem. From what I understand and what we'll be showing you, Satan appears here at the close of probation, and Sunday law is way over here. So if you're waiting for Satan, it's going to be too late. You're looking for the wrong sign. And this is why it's so important that we understand the line of events. This is the light that we had that everybody was preaching. 1844 all the way through basically till 1919 and up until 1919. And then we had a huge spiral downward, Laodicea. I mean, it was a disaster. And now God's people are starting to awake. That was a really long answer for that question, but I mean, there's even more that we could get into. So we're going to move on. Thank you so much for your question. Okay. Quirky Glass. Question. Hello, Brother MacKenzie. Do you think that the no buy, no sell time will be 3.5 years? It seems like consistent time frame. Okay. So Sunday law, time. Will it be 3.5 years? Will it be 10 years? 20 years? Here's the answer. The answer is no. Now, here's why. Because in Revelation chapter 10, we're told that time is no longer. That means no more prophetic time. So that means we can't calculate anything. So I'm not even going to make a guess. The only thing I know for certain is that it has to be long enough that we have to grow food and preserve it and grow food and preserve it. And it has to be a long enough extended period of time that you can't just be a prepper and store enough, dehydrated, freeze-dried food in a bucket in your basement. Because this is going to be the most incredible struggle that we've ever seen. And I do believe that the Sunday law, no buy, no sell, will be years long, several years long. That's what I personally think. And there is plenty of evidence to show that, but a specific amount of time, we have no idea because time is no longer. There's no prophetic time. And here's how it works. So October 22, 1844, time stopped. Okay? So time is now in a gap. And it will only start up again at the close of probation. Why? Because we're in something right now called the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement. And during this time, it's one day, prophetically one day. So we are prophetically, and you can look back at some of the Judgment Day studies, but we'll probably cover this a little bit more later. We're still on the same prophetic day. When that ends, the next day will be October 23. That'll be the next day, prophetically. So we are in the Day of Atonement, which means that prophetic time is at a halt according to Revelation chapter 10, and I think it's verse 6 or 7. Let's see here. Yes, verse 6. So we have no way inside of this time frame to calculate time because time has ceased prophetically. So we have no way of knowing exactly. The only thing we know is that we need to be ready for anything. And when we look at some of the times during the Dark Ages where the Waldensians were in the mountains, this was years and decades and hundreds of years. So that's not what I'm saying it's going to be at the end, but we cannot calculate the time frame, and the final movements will be rapid ones, but rapid ones to you and me and rapid ones to God is two different things. But we have to keep in mind context. is there's 144,000 who will be alive. So from when it starts till when Sunday law ends, they won't die. So it's not going to be longer than their life. So they're going to live through this whole time all the way till the second coming. And I hope to be part of the 144,000. And so we know that it's going to be within a certain time frame. But what that time frame is, we don't know. Okay. Gabriella question: does God speak to you in audible voice and give you warning of what's to come? I mean, he can, but he speaks to us through his word. And that is the most reliable thing. If you're getting a voice and it contradicts what's written in the word and what's written in the Bible, it's not God's voice, it's the Satan's voice. And Satan can sometimes come to people as well. So we have to be very careful of these voices that we hear or things. We have to compare everything with the word because it will not contradict the word. God does not contradict himself. He can speak to people. People are praying and they're saying, Lord, please tell me, show me. And they will get an impression. They can hear something and God can speak to them that way, but it has to be in line with what's in the Bible. God will not ask you to do something contrary to what he has already told you. So if God's saying you're going to stay in the city and you're going to die a martyr, that is contrary to what the Bible says. Okay. Manuel, okay. Sorry. Let me go back here. Manuel, question: is it better to stay in a tropical country than Canada? I am Filipino and struggling Canada. Okay. Now, when talking about country living, so for instance, Canada, we have the USA, we have tropical places. All of them have pros and cons. And some people might not like the cold, but the cold does a lot of great things. Number one, it keeps your enemies away. There's a lot less people. There's a lot of things that can happen in tropical areas. Even though it seems warm, it's not always that easy to grow everything. I was talking to some people from South America in one of the warmest places. And they said because it's tropical, it's really hard to grow a lot of things besides just fruit, which are seasonal. It really depends on your area. We're not going to have time to go through all of this today. I personally think that Canada is a fantastic place to be in the country. And you can grow all the food you need. People have lived here for, hundreds of years growing their own food. In Russia and Siberia, growing all their own food and all these things. So there's definitely pros and cons to each of these different areas. It's cold, which can be a good thing too. You don't need a freezer. You don't have the bugs that you do. You don't have snakes. You don't have a lot of these sort of things that come along with warmer areas. Now, there's some places in the U.S. that are great weather-wise, but you have to take in consideration the locality. And let me just go to the side here, and this goes down to the criteria, which we will do in another video. And actually, I'm going to write this down so that I don't forget. And we answer this in another study. Canada versus tropical or other, not necessarily only Canada, or other tropical areas, and the criteria. And because there's criteria of the property itself, so there's property criteria, and then there's location criteria. And both of these are really important. Um, you know, not in a city. That's a criteria. And then another criteria for the property would be minimum acres. And these are all things that we're going to go over in a lot of detail in some upcoming studies. So make sure you don't miss it. Make sure you join every week to take a look at this. Thank you for your question. Okay, Eric, question. Doesn't Ellen White talk about cities being destroyed? Yes, she absolutely does. If you go to the book Country Living on page 7.3, it says the following. The ungodly cities of our world are to be swept away by the besom of destruction. In the calamities that are now befalling immense buildings and large portions of cities, God is showing us what will come upon the whole earth. Now, if we continue, I'll erase point 3 because it continues on. I am bidden to declare the message that the cities full of transgression and sinful in the extreme will be destroyed by earthquakes, by fire, by flood. All the world will be warned that there is a God who will display his authority as God. His unseen agencies will cause destruction, devastation, and death. All the accumulated riches will be as nothingness. So, absolutely, there will be destruction in the cities. And this is a really key part of the 7 last plagues. And this is what a lot of people don't understand about the 7 last plagues is these 7 last plagues are not just, the water changing color to blood and, all these things that seem kind of ethereal almost. But these 7 last plagues, and we're going to show this from the Bible, are actually effects of wars. This is destruction by wars that are going to come on the world. So when Jesus says wars and rumors of wars, we're looking the 7 last plagues. This is the Third World War. And we're going to look at this. I know that might be a crazy thing to say for a lot of you, but this is really the case. These 7 last plagues is destruction like there has never been on this planet, literally bombing the earth to smithereens. And we're going to cover this in an upcoming study. Thank you for your question. Okay. Wing Yin Chan question. Are the 144,000 in Revelation the only God's people who are not facing death when second coming? The answer is no. The answer is no. So the 144,000, and there's another group called the Great Multitude. Okay? Now, we have 2 examples in the Old Testament of people who went alive. We have Enoch, which we just talked about, and another one, Elijah, which is very amazing because every time we have these examples in the Bible, they correlate exactly to how many times that thing is going to happen. And we have exactly 2 people who went without seeing death, and we have 2 groups at the end who will not see death. Now, if we look at the story of Noah, and we're going to do this really briefly, we'll cover this a lot more in another study. So we have Noah and his family, right? But there was a second group that was inside as well, and that was the animals. So there was 2 groups who went in. If you didn't see our last study on 370 days, go watch it. Please go watch it. We talked all about the typology of Noah's Ark in connection to the last day events, what the family represented and what the animals represented. It's really, really critical. These animals don't represent just animals. This represents the people who are coming in because of the message that the 144,000 are giving. Noah and his family represent the 144,000. The animals represent the great multitude. And we'll cover this in more detail when we talk about the 144,000. Okay. Let me read one more about the destruction of the cities here. This is from Great Controversy, page 589. Great Controversy 589. While appearing to the children of humanity as a great physician who can heal all their maladies, he will bring disease and disaster. This is talking about Satan. Until populous cities are reduced to ruin and desolation. Even now, he is at work in accidents and calamities by sea and by land, in great conflagrations, in fierce tornadoes and terrific hailstorms, in tempests, floods, cyclones, tidal waves, and earthquakes, in every place and in thousands of forms. Satan is exercising his power. He sweeps away the ripening harvest, and famine and distress follow. He imparts to the air a deadly taint. What is this deadly taint? There's a lot of interesting things that are talked about here. And thousands perish by the pestilence. These visitations are to become more and more frequent and disastrous. Destruction will be upon men and beast. The earth mourneth and fadeth away. The haughty people do languish. The earth is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. Okay. Carla Ainsley, question: where in the Bible did you point to the deadly blow, Twin Towers? The Twin Towers, that was Isaiah 30. Whoops, there was a delay in my pen. Isaiah 30, verse 23 to 25. And this is talking about the sealing in connection to the towers falling. And if you go to the Judgment Day studies, there is one specifically on this. It's one of the last studies that we did. And there's even more than this. Jesus even talks about this, but we'll probably cover this in another study, so I won't get into too much detail here. Okay. Anna Morales. I got corrected on this name once before. So, question. So the latter rain happens after Sunday law, but before no buy, no sell. What does the death decree goes out about this? Does the death decree go out about the sixth plague? No, the latter rain does not happen after Sunday law, but before the no buy, no sell, because those are kind of the same thing. Because the latter rain, as we just seen, started because of 2001. This is when the latter rain really started to fall, was after 2001. Then we have the Sunday law, which has stages. Fines, imprisonment, and then I'm just going to put the right word is inducements, but I can't fit it. Inducements. And the final step in the Sunday law is no buy, no cell. So it's really one and the same. It's just the progression to the full catastrophe. And the latter rain has to be falling now because by this time, this is the sealing of God's people. And they can't be sealed unless the latter rain is giving them the true doctrine, because Deuteronomy 32:2. Go to Deuteronomy 32:2. It says that doctrine is the rain. And that's why this light and the truth has been coming since 2001, because 2001 is the start of the fourth angel's message, is the start of the light shining on the entire world, is the true doctrine of the final events. Deuteronomy 32:2, my reign is as doctrine. And this is how the people are sealed, because the people cannot be sealed in error. They're sealing into true last day prophecy doctrine. And then once the no by no cell is happening, they're giving the loud cry. But they can't give the loud cry if they don't know the loud cry. So that's why the latter rain has to come first. They're given the message and then they give the message. They receive the rain, they give the rain. So it goes both together. And then the death decree about the sixth plague, yes. So if we move this over and we get to the close of probation, and we have the seven last plagues, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right about here is the death decree against God's people, but nobody will die. Just clarifying that. Nobody will die. And this will last for 15 days. And we will flee into the mountains, which means you have to be living by the mountains and living like Enoch did, country living message close to the mountains, so you can flee into the mountains. If you don't, you might be like Abraham and have to move locations, even if you're in the country. So there's all these defining factors that we have to consider here. Hope that answered your question. Okay, we have way too many questions coming in. Not way too many, just a lot of questions. It's great. I'm super excited about it. I just know that people are going to be, it's really late on the East Coast right now. So they're probably long gone to bed. Unless they're not, maybe they're still awake. If they are, then praise the Lord. Paul, he preached until the wee hours of the morning, and this was a good thing. So I love the questions, because that means people are thinking and they want the truth. Okay. Affixton Jetton question: can you explain how wicked people can feel judged by righteous people who are just living? I will give you a great example. Okay. This is gonna be kind of a funny one. So Subway. Here's let's just call this me. Okay? And we're going to call this them. And we go to Subway and we get ourselves, this is not a plug for Subway, by the way, but that's okay. We get a nice, foot-long sandwich, and or 2 foot longs. Depends how hungry you are. And mine, because I'm entirely plant-based, mine is going to be all veggies. Okay? And this guy over here, he's getting stuff, but he's got, you know, he's got the scrambled eggs in there. He's got some whatever different kind of meat and other things in his sub. I don't say anything. And this is like real firsthand experience. I don't say anything. I'm just happy to eat my sub. But he starts making comments. You're judging. And then I am like, what's going on? I didn't say anything. Here's the problem. If people know that you have a certain thought, so for me, I wouldn't say that I'm um, vegan, but that I'm plant based because vegan is really kind of like a religion at this point. I wear a leather belt, and that's not a vegan thing to do. I have pet animals and things like this. But if you're plant based and you eat at a restaurant with someone who's not plant based, usually they make comments or usually they feel awkward or something or, whatever. Um, that's a really simple example. Uh, I went to school for nutrition, so I do consultations with people, and there's people who know how I eat. And so even though they know I could help them, they won't ask because they know part. They maybe don't know the full thing, but they know part of what I'm going to recommend. And they're just like, you know what? Better just not ask because I don't like what I'm going to hear. And if I keep telling people country living and someone is living in the city, what do you think they're going to think that I think? And maybe I don't think anything. I just think, you know, I encourage that they would make a change. But I don't even have to say anything for them to feel judged that I'm telling them something because they know already the end of the story. This is a very simple thing. I mean, about the Sabbath, when it comes to the Sabbath question, maybe you have family members that do things on Sabbath and you don't do those things on Sabbath. So there's a ton of examples for uh, things like that. Okay. Uh, Cavetta James. Question. Since we rent in the country, you don't think we need to flee when Sunday law hits as we planned on taking our bug out bag and fleeing? Okay. No, absolutely not. Because you won't have enough in your bug out bag to last long enough. Like we said, that Sunday law lasts for several growing seasons. We don't know exactly how many, but several. And your bug out bag isn't going to hold enough for you to live a year or two on. Um, you're And that's okay if you're renting in the country. You just need to start making that process out. Now, okay, I'm going to address this again. It's too late. Now, people have been saying this ever since I learned about country living 20 years ago. Okay? If those people 20 years ago got a loan, I'm not suggesting, not telling you I'll jump out to get a loan, okay? But if they went and got a loan in, you know, let's say 2005, hopefully by 2025, it's paid off. And this is the thing. If people would just stop saying, I can't, and saying, I will obey God, he would actually be able to work and help you. Now, if you're renting, you're in a great place already because you can start learning the skills, start growing a garden, start gathering the tools that you need, buying the different tools. And we'll do some whole studies on this, what tools you're going to need in order to be self sufficient. And then start finding a piece of property. Maybe you start small, you add to it, you build to it. Don't throw it together so that's unsellable. make it nice, and then maybe you sell it. And now you have money to go to a different property, or you partner with someone. Be very careful who you partner with. Okay, extremely careful. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but you have to be extremely careful. You're 100% on the same page. You have agreements in place. It's not, make sure it's really well done. But if you're planning on fleeing when Sunday law hits, there's no really point to flee, because at Sunday law, it's only you can't buy or sell. There's no death decree. There's no like reason to flee. The only thing is if you're paying rent, that you won't be able to pay rent, and so you'll be kicked out of your rental. Which means that you need a place that you're not renting. And this kind of gets into the whole question, which I probably should address right now, is taxes. And this is one that a lot of people talk about and almost use as an excuse not to be in the country, because, oh, we'll have to pay taxes. They'll take our land. This is God's problem at that time. You be obedient. God does the rest. I don't think anybody, like, people were trying to get into Noah's Ark and they couldn't. God protected it. Our country property here, where our nice little home is, and our garden over here, and we have our forest and, whatever else is on our property that we need there, God will protect this. There will be a barrier around here. And what will be the barrier? There will be angels. I'm sorry, that was a really bad angel. But angels protecting our property. I'm going to erase it because it's so bad. So we don't need to be worried about that. There's even references that say that God's people will be chased to the edge of the border of their country property, and the people cannot come in to the edges of their property. So this is the thing. When it's talking about taxes, we do what we can while we can. But if you can't buy or sell, they're not even going to accept the money for your taxes. So you don't need to worry about that. That's God's problem at that time. I hope that answered your question well enough. Okay. Maria C. Question. Can you please explain when Satan is going to appear? Satan is going to appear, and we'll cover this in another study, right around this moment here, the close of probation. Sunday law has already happened. Everything's going forward. And Sunday law and Satan appears here. The purpose of Satan's appearing is not to deceive God's people. It's not to enforce Sunday law. It is to take the people on his side already and get them to go global, universal Sunday law, encourage them, and then enforce the death decree. And that is the end goal, is to enforce the death decree. And there's a lot more I can say about that, and we'll go into detail and we'll study that out in another study. Okay. Manuel, question: what is the Omega apostasy in the SDA Church? Wow, that is you couldn't have picked a bigger question. I have read that before, but unable to comprehend because I'm still new in the church at that time during the year 2000 or Y2K era. Okay, so there's something called the Alpha, and there's something called the Omega. Now, we're told, and if we study, Kellogg, yes, Kellogg, breakfast cereals, he was part of the Alpha. And he actually wrote a book called The Living Temple. Now, most people have not read the book. And I do not recommend you read the book. Okay? Do not read the book. I have read parts of the book, and it is so filled with sophistry and sly, and it seems good when he's talking, but it's full of satanic doctrine, really. And why? What caused the alpha to happen? Alpha posse? Spiritualize the scripture. This is why I'm so hard on Miller's Rule 11, which is what is a figure, what is a symbol, and how do we determine that, and how do we not spiritualize the Bible away, but use it literally. The omega will be of the same thing. It'll spiritualize literal prophecy. So I'll give you some examples. Revelation 16, Revelation 9, Daniel 11, all of these things that are being very talked about now. Even Revelation 17, even 13. And people are spiritualizing these things. Daniel 11, most people understand this spiritually. And this came in after the spiritualizing of the scriptures. This was never something that was done. So this is a whole different conversation, but I believe very strongly, and we have a whole study on this. If you go look, I have a series, How to Study Prophecy. It's a 4-part series. If you go to adtv.watch, it's a 4-part series, How to Study Prophecy. Plus, there's a whole one in Books of a New Order in the Judgment Day study series. There's a whole topic on Books of a New Order. And one of these people is Louis F. Weir. I believe very strongly that he is part of the Omega. And you're going to say, wow, MacKenzie, this is one of the most published guys. This is like, we use this in all our seminaries. We like this guy, quotes Ellen White left, right, and center. He talks about, all this stuff. Here's the problem. He's a spiritualizer. And he is against Miller's rules, which we are exactly counseled. Whoops. Rules. We're exactly counseled that these are the principles that we should use. And Miller has 14 of them. Weir has 13 of his own rules. And some of them are almost the exact opposite. So go check it out. We're going to talk about this more in upcoming videos, the Alpha and the Omega, and exactly how they started creeping in. And a lot of people are going to reference guys like Ford, books like Questions on Doctrine. And yes, but what is the problem? It's not only just the book. It's where it came from. And where it came from is it's spiritualized the 2300 days. That's what happened. So I won't say any more on that, but that's a fantastic question. Kavetta Jane's question. There are 4 stages to the Sunday law. There's actually 5 stages to Sunday law. Maybe you're not going to think about one of them. So we have fines, and there's I'll read the quote in another presentation. Fines, imprisonment, inducements, and then no buy no cell. And the final stage, which happens down the line, is death decree. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, like that. Now, 4, if you're counting up to just this part here, where people are able to make decisions, and then after the close of probation, there's technically another stage of it. Okay, so we have, there's a quote here, Great Controversy 607. The church appeals to the strong arm of civil power, and in this work, Papists and Protestants unite. As the movement for Sunday enforcement becomes more bold and decided, the law will be invoked against commandment keepers. They'll be threatened with fines and imprisonment, and some will be offered positions of influence, and others reward and advantages, just like Enoch talked about advantages. So that's Great Controversy, page 607. GC, page 607. Okay. Now we have, by anonymous question, are the 15 days literal or prophetic? I'm sorry, they are 15 literal days. 15 days literal, because that comes from Revelation 18, verse 10. Should be 10. And it says, standing afar off for fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. So 1 hour. And now we know from Ezekiel 4, verse 6, that a day equals a year in prophecy. So 1 hour equals a 24th of a day. So all we need to do is, in order to understand this, 1 hour is a 24th of a day, which means we need a 24th of a year, because a day equals a year. So a year is 360 days. I'm going to zoom in here. 360 days divided by 24 equals roughly 15 days. Okay? Simple as that. And we'll take one more question. Stardusty question: are there biblical explanations for the difference between the 10 plagues of Egypt and the 7 last plagues, such as number of plagues and type of disasters? Sorry if already covered. No, not already covered. And very good question. So we have Egypt, and we have, we'll call it World's End. And we had 10 plagues here. We have 7 plagues here. We have some affected God's people. Here, none affect God's people. But they both happened for the same reason, and certain ones specifically happened for specific reasons. And we're not going to go through each of them right now, but there is an incredible correlation here, and a correlation to, how should I say, some of the end time players, because this one is connected to a woe. And that is connected to this beast in prophecy, there's another beast, and it's a locust-like beast. And in the plagues of Egypt, there was a plague of locust, right? And it was brought by an east wind and removed by a west wind. Now, if you are, oops, I don't know what is happening here. East wind removed by west wind, okay? And if we are good Bible students, most Bible students know that wind equals wars. So if the locusts were brought by an east wind, that's an eastern war, and then it's removed by a war from the west. And this is incredible typology in connection with the woe and the locust and how they play a part in the last plagues. Now, just for consideration, okay, we're going to make one comparison here. Revelation 9 and Revelation 16. This is called the last plagues. And these are the first plagues. Now you understand why these are even called last plagues. Why would it say last plagues? There must be 7 first plagues. Well, there is 7 first plagues, and you can read that in Revelation 9, verse 22. I think it's 22. No, 20 and 21. So go read that and then make a comparison for yourself and compare number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And you're going to see that they are identical. The trumpet plagues are identical as the 7 last plagues. These ones were local, and these ones are global. But that's all I'll say about that. So there's a lot to cover in all of the history of the timeline that we're going through here. It's an incredible journey that we're taking. We're on study number 7 out of who knows if this is ever going to end by the time Jesus comes. I might need a break at some point, but we're going to keep going because people are very confused and God's people need to put their skin back on. Ezekiel 37 talks about the people of Israel that their skin is all gone. They're dry bones. The only thing that wakes them up is prophecy. Ezekiel's told to prophesy to the bones, and that's what wakes them up. Why? Because Micah chapter 3 says it's the false teachers of prophecy that tear the skin off the bones and they remove their life. That's why our people are not having the passion for sharing, the passion for country living, the passion for getting ready for the last day events, because their skin is torn off. They don't have the energy. They don't have the drive. They don't have the push because they're missing the true understanding of prophecy, which is why we're doing these studies and trying to share this. I really thought we weren't going to go 3 hours today, but we just about did it. But I'm very glad that everybody's having so many questions. I know I've had lots of questions, and they need to be answered. These are the questions that right now need to be answered so people can receive the latter rain, which is the doctrine of the true understanding of the final events, so they can go to the world and they can give the last message. They need to receive it nor to give. You can only give what you've received and what you've accepted from God. So I just want to thank everybody for joining these studies. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like the video and share it, because this message needs to go to everyone. Go to our newsletter, join our newsletter, And then you will get updates, you'll get the study links, the study notes, you'll get all of these things, updates on, other presentations regarding prophecy that you're not going to want to miss. And when we start coming out with our courses, with all the different things on country living, if you want to learn country living, go to our How to Country channel. We're talking about things there. We have a lot of amazing stuff coming to that channel. And if you want to in person learn how to do this stuff, join our apprenticeship program, come here in person, and you can see exactly how you can get ready. The other day, I just planted over an acre of wheat. And we had already planted around an acre already, maybe a tiny bit under an acre. So we have a couple acres of wheat that's growing here right now. I will be putting in a little bit more. The garden is in full swing, and we're doing all of this that we're doing here is to try and show you guys that this is possible, that you can do this too. It doesn't take, you being a millionaire in order to do country living. All it takes is you being faithful and saying, Lord, show me, teach me, I want to know. And we're doing things here in some of the simplest methods possible. We show from the smallest scale to the largest scale, not the largest, larger scales of how to do things, how to grow things. From just a homestead garden where you and your family and family members and friends can eat, all the way to a market garden and be able to sustain yourself. So we're going to be continuing this for quite a while. There is a lot of points that we have to cover, a lot of questions that people are having. Thank you so much for joining us. God bless. Make sure you're studying more and more every single day. We'll see you in the next study.